I'm Joan Kelley Walker. Join me as we stroll down the Fash Avenue. And with me today is Jodi Goodfellow, the founder of Startup Fashion Week. Hi, Jodi.
Thank you for having me.
So you're a full-time school teacher. What was your motivation to start Startup Fashion Week?
It's a long story. There's a lot of culminating reasons into what led me to start and launch Startup Fashion Week. I actually launched a fashion tech startup about 8 years ago called Fashion Forward. And through trying to get that business off the ground, I did a lot of networking in the fashion industry as well as the tech startup ecosystem here in Toronto. And I discovered how very different those two worlds were. And someone who was trying to launch a business in both those sectors, it was a little bit confusing to realize where my audience was. So I wanted to create an audience where I could create more awareness for the fashion tech emergence and how these two industries were coming together. So I actually launched an event series about 7 years ago called Fashion in the Digital World, where I invited other fashion tech startups in Toronto to create a platform giving them an opportunity to share with people what they were building, some of these really exciting new ventures that were covering different areas of fashion and technology. And that event in particular started to grow a lot of interest. We started with an audience of about 60 people, and after the fourth round of hosting that event, we grew to about 175. So I knew I was onto something, and as my startup, after 3 years, was really not growing as much as I had hoped, we weren't able to successfully get investors on board. So I realized that there were a lot of struggles in launching a business in the fashion tech industry. I knew that fashion tech was kind of the way forward for business, and I wanted to create a platform where startups could have opportunities, because a lot of the other opportunities available here in the city weren't feasible for startups. And so I wanted to kind of culminate all of those challenges and really create an opportunity and platform for startup entrepreneurs to get access and resources and have a platform for opportunity.
Wow, I didn't know any of that. Thank you so much for explaining it. Now, it seems to me that it's a bit of a no-brainer that tech and fashion go together, as you just explained.
Absolutely.
So why was nobody doing it? And there's a huge void in the market. So do you feel like you're filling that void?
I feel like I am now, and there's still lots of room for growth as well. But back then, it was a conversation that no one had started yet, and we were a little bit behind here in Canada in understanding how these two worlds were colliding, because already in the United States and across Europe, this was already happening, and people were very much aware of it and jumping on board. You know, a lot of bigger brands were already jumping on board and really curious and experimenting with technology and fashion. But here in Canada, things were starting off a little slower. And I think that was part of my struggle, is understanding, there's a lot of exciting things happening, and how can we create noise here in Canada for all these really interesting and innovative ideas that are being created here. It was really unfortunate because a lot of those startups actually failed, like my own. But it's because with fashion and technology, it is an expensive endeavor, and you often do need investors to come on board. And in Canada, at least at that time, there weren't enough investors willing to take that risk because it was such a new concept here in Canada. So I think now that it has proven to be the way forward in other parts around the world, there are investors that are more interested. And there's been a lot of success proven from startups even here based out of Toronto. So there's a lot less risk at this point. So I definitely think that there's room for growth, and hopefully the platform I have created has definitely allowed people to become more aware of how technology and fashion have come together. And hopefully a lot of the startups that we help have gone on to grow and continue their success.
So you mentioned investors. There's so many Toronto fashion weeks in Toronto. Do you find that you're vying for the same investors, the same sponsorship dollars, or do you think Startup Fashion Week is something unique because of the tech aspect?
Yeah, so I think what makes us unique is not only the tech aspect, but the aspect that we're helping startups launch. And at this point in time, after 5 years running Startup Fashion Week here in Toronto, I definitely don't see us crossing paths with sponsors for other Fashion Week events, which has been interesting. Yeah, it's been actually really great. But we also have a very different audience as well, so it's not surprising. Our audience is really different. We're more about business and helping entrepreneurs build their businesses, and so I think for us, we kind of target a lot of brands or businesses that want to sponsor us because they like that aspect of our platform.
So let's talk about the success that you have had. Do you have any stats or anything about how many new designers that you've helped, or any numbers that you can share with us?
Yeah, absolutely. So I believe we've helped approximately 50 different designers launch their businesses here in Canada, and we've also helped over 300 models also get exposure here in Toronto as well as in Montreal, because of course we have expanded beyond just Toronto. So we host Startup Fashion Week in Montreal, and we're looking at other places to grow as well at this point. But we've helped a lot of different businesses, and they range. And that's what's exciting, is we've helped startup businesses who have done, women's wear apparel, for anything from swimwear to maternity to evening wear to couture. We've also helped shoe companies, we've helped menswear brands, and even children couture brands as well. So we've helped a whole variety of different apparel designers and businesses. But we've also helped a lot of fashion tech startups as well, which is exciting. We've helped anything from apparel where technology is built into the apparel, such as one of our alumni named Enlighten. They created a huge spectacle on the runway and definitely got a lot of exposure afterwards, but we also have helped a lot of wearable technology, such as a really cool app called Seam, where they have a device that pairs with the app, and it's a safety tech device that you actually wear. So we've helped a lot of different startups in Toronto, and even some from the US that have come to us looking for exposure here in Canada. We try to keep it simply to Canadian, but the odd time we'll come across something really cool and innovative and find a way to integrate them.
It's just so great.
Yeah.
You can't help yourself.
Yeah, exactly.
So of all the people that come to you that want to be part of Startup Fashion Week, how do you determine who gets in? That's got to be super hard.
It's
I
really
can't imagine.
hard. It really is.
Is that your decision, or do you have a jury or a board?
I used to have an advisory board that would help me go through the selection process. But now I really kind of just do it on my own. We do have applications. There is an application process. This year we had over 130 applications.
Wow.
So we have to go through a lot.
That's great.
It's amazing. But at the end of the day, for Toronto Startup Fashion Week, we only actually are able to help 10 designers and 2 tech startups. Same within Montreal. So when you really think about it, it's not a huge ratio, in terms of who we can help. And believe me, those are just the ones that apply. There's a lot that do inquire and they want exposure. They want to be part of it.
Maybe they feel they're not ready
but
yet.
maybe they feel they're not ready yet. Exactly. So
Right.
there's a lot of startups out there. A lot of people have an interest in building a business in fashion, but there's also a high failure rate as well.
Yeah.
So hopefully,
do you try and help them? Like, do you critique them and say, this is what we think isn't quite strong enough? Do you give them feedback so maybe they can apply again the next year?
So what I learned by building this is that most of the designers we're helping, of course, because they are startups, they haven't been through a Fashion Week program before. So we've also become kind of like an incubator program. So we teach them not only how to participate in a Fashion Week by helping them manage media relations, and we teach them how to write a press release, we teach them how to even create their own media database and things like that. We create a PR plan for each and every designer that we're representing, because we want to make sure that they're leaving this experience with, a set of skills that they can use moving forward to help them grow and continue to grow as well. So this year, actually in Toronto, we hosted a 2-day boot camp for designers, and it was mandatory for all of our designers to actually participate. And this was because we wanted to make sure that all of the entrepreneurs participating were business ready. because what a lot of designers don't realize is that participating in a fashion week is a lot of added stress and a lot of added work onto your day-to-day business operations.
And quite often expense.
Yeah, and an expense, exactly. Yeah. Sometimes they don't realize the expense that it can be, because at the end of the day, there's the designer fee, and then on top of that, then they have to prepare for the possibility of even buying a video package or a photo package, or maybe hiring their own PR agent to manage their media relations if they don't feel that they're going to get enough out of the experience. So there's a lot of different costs that can add up. A lot of them are optional, but we want to prepare them, and so we made it mandatory for them to participate this year.
Good.
Yeah.
Well, I am a huge advocate of mentoring, and I love that you're doing that with everyone. Do those people that you've helped get started, do they come back and mentor other people? Have you thought about that?
We have had some of our designers come back to talk at some of our events. We definitely incorporate a lot of conferences and that sort of thing. So we bring back some of our alumni to talk to the designers that are participating in that current year, and that way they get feedback in terms of what they did, what they could have done better during the process, how they could have taken advantage of the whole platform a little bit more, and what kind of opportunities they got out of it afterwards. Just because it is important for them to understand that participating in a fashion week is not about that 5 minutes of fame that everyone thinks it's about.
Yeah.
It's about building relationships throughout that entire process. And what you do with those relationships afterwards is what determines how many opportunities you're going to get. So that's what we try to really reinforce to all of the designers is don't just focus on that 5 minutes of fame. You really need to emphasize building relationships leading up to that 5 minutes and then doing a lot of follow-ups afterwards.
So talk about building relationships. How does Startup Fashion Week have relationships with all the other fashion weeks in Toronto? Or is there one? Does there need to be unity between everybody and all the different shows? Or should they all just be standing alone?
I mean, myself, I come from a background of education, like we said. So for me, when I got into this industry and when I put myself into this role, I was very naive to what I was expecting, quite honestly. And I thought that, everybody was going to be a community player and we were all going to support each other. I learned very quickly that's not quite how this industry operates, and it's unfortunate. But I'm also thick-skinned, so I'm able to navigate through that. And in my opinion, I think that there's room for a lot of amazing platforms. There's room for, great initiatives. And I think that there are a lot of strong events happening here in Toronto, and we should be proud of that. We should be supportive, but I do think that each event should be supporting each other, in the best way possible, and sometimes that can just be, by attending events or reaching out on occasion to see, is there any way I can support you? I know myself, for example, with Vanya at Fat, I myself have reached out to her from time to time to say, I got this really interesting applicant, this designer that I think would be better suited for your platform. So if you'd like, I'll send you the information to that designer. So things like that, collaborating in that way, even if it's just a small way, but it can be meaningful, and it creates more of a cohesive community, I think, and a strong leadership.
And you have to start somewhere.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, it's really beautiful that you do that. I think some people are just so busy with what they're doing in their show that they really don't have time or energy to kind of, go there with the rest of them.
Absolutely.
Do you attend a lot of the other shows?
I have attended the old Toronto Fashion Week. I haven't attended the new one yet. Quite honestly, because that's kind of when I'm really, the September one at least, that's when I'm really kind of
in the
getting
middle of what you're doing.
Yeah, exactly. So, and then usually the other one falls on March break, and I'm usually out of here on vacation, enjoying my 1 week of being away and having an opportunity to get some downtime. So I haven't had a chance to go to the new Toronto Fashion Week, unfortunately. I have been to Tom, I haven't been to TW. I've definitely been to FAT to support them. And I also attended one of the Indigenous Fashion Week programs that launched last year as well.
Do you find at all that the scheduling is difficult? Because there's no master calendar where everybody says, okay, I'm doing it this week, I'm doing it that week, so that you know. Do you find that the fact that a lot of them overlap is a hindrance for you to fill the seats at your Startup Fashion Week?
It definitely can be. Startup Fashion Week has always been consistent. We've always held our event in October, and we did shift maybe from the second week to the third week only because Toronto Fashion Week used to be, in that window. It opened up, so I maybe moved it by a week, but we've always been consistent with our timing. We're only once a year, so for us it's definitely important to have consistency. But I have seen that, unfortunately some of the other fashion weeks have not been as consistent, and I understand sometimes things change and it's important to evolve. But I do feel strongly that there should be, we should be working, together in terms of creating those timelines, because we have to, in order to build a stronger fashion industry, we need to work together. That's the only way that it's going to happen. And
But how do you do that, and who leads the charge, and what does it look like?
I think there's different approaches that can be taken, and it would be great if all of the leaders of the fashion weeks came together to have a roundtable discussion perhaps, and really kind of looked at timing and looked at the reasons why some of us are holding our events at the times that we do, the reasons why some are holding events twice a year as opposed to one, or the opposite. I think there's a lot of really good discussion to come of something like that. So I certainly wouldn't be opposed to sitting down with all the leaders. I myself have tried to reach out to the City of Toronto to initiate something like that, and I'd love to see something like that happen.
Do you think it's the city that has to take charge?
Definitely not. I really don't think so. The city is just one avenue, and I think that
somebody has to do it.
Someone has to do it, right? And sometimes, sometimes you just have to reach out for an external party to, sit down and take a look at and listen to, everybody speak, because we're all so passionate about what we do. So sometimes I think it would be really, to our advantage to have someone there listening who isn't quite as involved as what we are. But we're doing this to benefit the city, so I think it's important that they do have a sense of involvement. So, so it would be great whether they were the ones to organize it or if they were just, a party there to listen. I think either way it would be great to have them as part of a conversation.
So last question, you mentioned expanding into other cities. You're already in Montreal. Do you feel like the rest of Canada is being kind of left out? And what's your plan to address that?
I don't think so at all. I think that, we have entered into the Montreal market because we did host a couple events there to test out the market first. I hosted a one-day event in 2006 as well as 2007. We also hosted events in Ottawa, and the intent wasn't originally to necessarily branch out. It was at first to encourage more people to come to Toronto. But what we heard from people in Montreal is, we want you to come here. Because they were starving for an opportunity and a platform similar to what we were creating here. So we kind of listened to what they were saying, and by comparing the two cities and our experiences, we realized that the best city for us to expand to next would have been Montreal. We're now looking at expanding to Vancouver because we've had a lot of interest and support coming from the West Coast, and so we're looking at the opportunity to launch a one-day event next year in 2019 in Vancouver, which is really exciting. But I do think that there's a lot happening, in fashion across Canada. There's definitely fashion weeks that are taking place in Vancouver as well as out east, and they may, they're all different and they serve a different purpose and a different audience, but I don't think that they're missing out. I think that each province or each main city has a different audience, and in some cases they may respond well to events or event platforms like a fashion week, and in some cases that might not be the right solution for them. You know, fashion weeks aren't the end all to fashion. There's a lot more to the industry than just a fashion week or just an event. So Canada has a lot to offer, and we just have to recognize that and celebrate that as best we can.
Right. And Jodi, I could talk to you all day long about this. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me and for talking about the industry of fashion in Canada.